You're now listening to the SportsPro podcast show. Hello and welcome to the SportsPro podcast. I'm Sam Carp, head of editorial here at SportsPro, and the guest on this week's show is Jonny Keogh, head of UK sports at YouTube. Now, some big numbers for you to set the scene. YouTube boasts more than 2 billion daily users and claims sports fans consume more than 40 billion hours of sports content on the platform annually, while the company said in 2024 that watch time of sports content on connected TV had grown 30% year over year. YouTube has long been a hub for shoulder content and behind-the-scenes features, but, as many listeners will know, has become more involved in live sport over recent years, not only through the acquisition of rights to premium properties like the NFL, but also as a platform for creator watch-alongs, which are increasingly viewed as a way for rights holders to reach new audiences. So who better than Jonny to provide us with some insight into what a good YouTube strategy looks like if you're an organisation involved in the business of sport today? And over the next 20 minutes or so, we discuss how YouTube became the destination for sports highlights, how leagues like the WSL have used the platform to grow audiences and secure sponsors, and how to leverage data insights on the platform to both inform your strategy and drive commercial growth. There's also time to discuss content monetization opportunities, whether there's an argument for some sports to lean into YouTube as their primary distribution platform, and how the company's involvement in sport will evolve. Plenty to get through then, so that's enough from me. Here's Jonny Keogh. Jonny Keogh, head of UK sports at YouTube. Thank you very much for joining me here in the studio at SportsPro Media Summit. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. It's been a great summit so far. I've absolutely loved the sessions. Great to network with everyone. Yeah, it's a fixture in the calendar, this summit. It's become now. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to hear. And to clarify, I didn't slip you a fiver to say that when you said it was a fixture in the calendar. So I'm glad you brought it up organically. But I've just pulled you away from the YouTube forum, which I think probably tells you everything you need to know about the growing significance of YouTube within sport, and I guess the way that people working within sport are trying to work out their best way of utilising their presence on the platform. But let's kind of, start with you, I guess, and maybe YouTube as a business. How does YouTube and how do you, as head of sports in the UK, work with the industry? Is it about getting as much sports content onto the platform as possible? Is it forging partnerships with rights holders? Is it kind of a mixture of all of the above?
It's a mixture of all of the above. There's that cliche. There's not one size fits all to this. Different parts of the sports ecosystem have different objectives for YouTube. A rights holder could have very different objectives than a broadcaster. A broadcaster will have very different objectives to creators. And so, fundamentally, my role is to drive strategic growth for all of the ecosystem, no matter what their objectives are, and essentially an enabler. And how we work with them, it's in partnership led. We listen. We don't kind of force tools on partners that aren't necessarily required to meet their objectives. And so it's a case of listening to partners, understanding their needs, how they want to work with the platform. YouTube is a huge toolbox of many different things, and so only until we understand what the objectives are of the company can we then pick the right tool to then provide a solution, hopefully. It's a case of driving strategic growth rather than forcing the platform and all the massive numbers that we've just listened to onto partners.
Yeah, for sure. And an ever-growing toolbox, it feels as well at the moment. I mentioned the forum before, but it does feel like there has kind of been a bit of a light bulb moment for sport in recent years as it relates to YouTube, which feels like a bit of a strange thing to say given how long the platform has been around. But before we kind of come on to, I guess, some of those different strategies that the rights holders and broadcasters that you mentioned have, be good to kind of hear about it from, I suppose, the YouTube perspective. What, how has YouTube sports strategy evolved in recent times? You mentioned the word enabler there. Is that kind of how you guys see yourself within that ecosystem?
Yeah, the platform is, YouTube is in its 20th year. It's 2025 is YouTube's 20th birthday. And so the platform has evolved naturally over that time. I think for sport specifically, I think the thing that's changed the most is how fans consume content. And so as a platform, we've had to evolve along with how fandom changes as well. I think fans have changed how we watch, whether that's with creators, whether that's alternative tactical streams. Fans have changed who we watch. The massive explosion of women's sport, women's football on the platform as well. And I think fans have changed what sports content looks like, whether that's different formats. Athletes on the platform is a huge growth area as well. So YouTube as a platform has had to evolve because viewing habits have changed. I think our role within the wider kind of sports distribution ecosystem is based around that, but it's also providing all our partners with choice. And I think that's, a key USP of YouTube is that it's multiple formats, VOD, shorts, podcasts, live. Podcasts particularly is growing massively over the past couple of years. 1 billion monthly active users, 400 million hours of podcasts watched on the TV every month. And so I think that's what we offer the sports ecosystem, is that choice to do storytelling in all these different formats. It's multiple devices. So, 20 years ago, it was very much desktop or mobile led. Now TV is the fastest growing platform and is the number one device in the US. And so I think because of that explosion of the TV, now the sports ecosystem are tapping into longer form content and the opportunities that provides, both from an engagement point of view and revenue. And then I think, we've developed multiple revenue streams as well. YouTube is the foundation is still ads, but there's a multitude of different streams from non-ads, channel memberships, for example. We have primetime channels for media companies, fan funding like Super Chat, Super Thanks. It still shocks me when I watch a live stream, a creator live stream, and just the community that support the creator via these microtransactions. And I think that's, something for sports to tap into as well. So long answer to your question, but I think the reason why YouTube has evolved is because the user and fan viewing habits have changed, and we've had to evolve with that.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm going to come on to those kind of some of those monetization pieces shortly, because I imagine a lot of people in that forum is one of the reasons that they're listening in is because they're trying to figure that side of things out. But I wanted to talk about the kind of behavior piece that you mentioned at the start of that answer, because I don't know when this happened. I'm sure I'm not the only person this has happened to, but YouTube has probably become the platform through which I consume most of my sports content now. I think whether it's something to do with kind of getting older and not having as much time and leisure to sort of watch the live game, for example, and Champions League on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday now anyway in the new cycle. I find less and less I'm able to tune in at sort of 7:45, 8 p.m. to watch it. So my way of consuming it is the following morning. I Google the fixture or the score. There's the thumbnail with the highlights package, and I go on and consume those highlights. And I guess highlights are sort of one of the, I suppose, first ways that people come onto the platform. Is that kind of something that's happened by design, I guess? Am I kind of a living and breathing case study of what you want, or how you sort of want people to behave and kind of come onto the platform?
Yeah, I think highlights is a gateway for sports fans on YouTube, and you're right. It's usually kind of a first port of call after the game, and the speed of upload is crucial for the exact the use case that you just mentioned there. We've done a lot of analysis on search traffic, and it reaches its peak at the full-time whistle. And so for broadcasters and rights holders getting highlights out quickly, utilizing tools like Google OneBox, for example, and tagging the video within one click, you're watching the highlight on YouTube. Highlights has been the foundation, and it opens the door and is a gateway to all of the fantastic sports content on the platform. The amount of times that I start by watching an 8-minute highlight video and then end up watching an hour-long podcast. Much like you, I don't have the time for doing that. But the point is, it's a gateway, and we're finding other elements of the sports ecosystem tapping into that gateway. I think golf has done a great job of supporting professional players in their YouTube channels, and they understand the relationship and the algorithm of how YouTube works. If I watch a round with Bryson DeChambeau, on the right-hand side on the suggested bar is very likely to be highlights of the latest round, or from the PGA Tour or from Sky Sports Golf, for example. And so you're right, highlights is the gateway, but I think it opens the door to the world of YouTube and the storytelling that provides.
Yeah, I was going to say, because there's probably maybe a bit of a misconception that YouTube is kind of a highlights destination, right? And I suppose that's something maybe you're trying to change, as you were mentioning before. There's all these other avenues now. There's the podcast side of things. There's all of the original programming that goes on there now. Brand content as well, live, et cetera, et cetera. Is that kind of something that you're kind of maybe trying to tweak a little bit, that perception of YouTube as just highlights?
Yeah, I think it comes back to this thing of choice for the sports ecosystem, and it's you can do your storytelling in many different ways, whether that's short form video, long form video, whether it's as a podcast, whether it's as a traditional VOD. But I think that the thing that runs throughout is that there are multiple different types of fans in the world, and they all expect different things from YouTube and the rights holders. You have the hardcore fan who will watch, I gave the example there on stage around a 3-hour compilation of F1 highlights. And then you've got the new fan who may have started their journey by watching a creator doing a vlog at the game, and their fandom for a particular sport starts from there. And so I think that's the opportunity for sports, is to understand, using YouTube analytics, to understand where your fans are, what else they're watching. I think I asked for a show of hands in the room there, is who understands or who has seen the inside of YouTube analytics. Mm-hmm. I believe it's unrivaled analytics and insights platform, and it tells you where your audience, or what other channels your audiences are watching, mm-hmm. which is huge, valuable data. So yeah, it's a powerful ecosystem.
Yeah, that's interesting as well, because I was going to come on to that data point, but maybe it's worth picking up on that now, because that insight that you mentioned in terms of other things that they're watching obviously gives that insight into their interests, and that's maybe something that a rights holder or a broadcaster, for example, can then sort of take and build out a commercial proposition for a brand who's in those kind of other interest spaces. Is that kind of sort of that layer of insight that you can provide? Is that a way that you're sort of working with your partners?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's there's one thing knowing who your audience is, and it's then strategically working out a way to then commercialize it as well. And I think there are many great examples of this. What the Women's Super League have done on YouTube with live streams and highlights and tons of shoulder content is, they worked out that of course UK is the domestic market, and that's where a lot of the viewership comes from. But around the world, YouTube is a global platform. And they discovered markets and fans that they didn't realize that they had before coming to YouTube. And now they've gone and commercialized that in APAC, for example. So that's one way. I think from a sponsorship angle as well, the recent partnership between Bundesliga and Mark Goldbridge is for a rights holder like the Bundesliga, where they have existing league-wide sponsors. How can they provide those sponsors with additive incremental audiences with the creators as well? So we announced earlier the SportsPro exclusive that I mentioned on stage, but Top 11, the game, are an existing league sponsor, and using Mark's younger audience, of which 65% are aged between 13 and 34, is a way for them to target that audience as well as linear broadcast in Germany and around the world. So yes, I think what YouTube provides is a global platform. It provides you with an audience that's ready to tap into, and it's there for you to commercialize. Yeah, for sure. And the WSL who you mentioned are an interesting example, because they obviously kind of previously broadcast live games on their own platform, FA Player, and then after moving on to YouTube, I think they sort of saw nearly 23 million views last season compared to what was around 2 million the season before. Would you be able to just kind of, I guess, shed a little bit more light on that, whether it is an official relationship and obviously, how that sort of came about, I guess, and how something like that works? Yeah, I think there's many different elements to it. I think what the Women's Super League realised is, after the original Lionesses' success in the Euros, that there was this groundswell of love for the players and teams and an opportunity to really seize the moment. And there was a zeitgeist around, and still is, around women's football in the UK. And I think what YouTube provides is a global platform with zero barriers to entry, and the ability to understand your audience and monetize it. And so the Women's Super League, it's a direct partnership between YouTube and the Women's Super League, but the partnership is very much around understanding what their goals are, and YouTube providing, like I said at the top of this interview, strategic solutions to meet those. One example from last year is using YouTube Multiview, which allows you to watch up to 4 games concurrently.
Mm.
The solution that was trying to solve for was to ensure that fans out there knew what other games were going on at the same time, other than the top games, Arsenal, Chelsea, Man City, Liverpool, for example. And the feedback that we had from users was, I watched my first ever Spurs women game because of YouTube Multiview. I didn't realize that was on the platform. So that's an example of how we've listened to a rights holder, understood what their objectives are, and provided in this case, a very technical solution. But and they've gone from strength to strength. The result of that partnership has meant that Women's Super League have secured a record-breaking broadcaster in the UK of Sky. They've secured broadcasters and commercial deals around the world because of the audience that they proved is on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And I gave the example earlier on stage, their recent partnership with Apple, for example, which provides products to teams, coaches, and everyone around the league. They've now then gone and activated that partnership on YouTube via the advertising and sponsorship integration. So, they're a very good case study of how to really get the best of YouTube, build an audience, and then go and commercialize it.
You've just listened to the first part of the interview with Jonny, but before we get back to it, I wanted to point you in the direction of the inaugural Global Sports Tech Report, produced by SportsPro and SportRadar. Regular SportsPro podder and editor Steve McCaskill was the lead author of the report, which was informed by a survey of 160 senior executives and offers a comprehensive view of the technology trends in sport today. So we'll be back to the interview right after this.
What's happening now and next in sports tech? As AI adoption accelerates rapidly, the inaugural Global Sports Tech Report from SportsPro and SportRadar reveals which technologies and trends are driving real business impact across 6 core areas of sport. Informed by a global survey of senior executives and insights from leading tech and sport organizations, the report offers a 360-degree view of what's working today and where the industry is headed tomorrow. Access the full report via the SportsPro website.
You're now listening to the SportsPro podcast show. I guess using WSL as an example, maybe a case study, some people would kind of look at that and argue, that why wouldn't you use YouTube as your primary distribution platform if you were, an organisation like the WSL that's still, in its growth phase, I suppose, does have, as you mentioned, kind of quite lucrative domestic broadcast deals, but internationally, obviously, still growing its audience domestically. Rather than operating their own platform. I presume that kind of is something that you maybe agree with, but would you also say that kind of that mix is also still quite important with the traditional broadcasters?
100%. We have an obsession in this industry with, a very binary approach of it has to be on linear, it has to be this. I think, if we go back to the Women's Super League example, the deal that they have in the UK is that there's 34 non-exclusive games live on YouTube, in addition to having the weight and power of Sky behind them, marketing it. Sky do a fantastic, unrivaled job of promoting and marketing women's sport, but they also recognise that we can work as a trifecta partnership so that everyone wins, particularly the fans. So I think the case of should we go D2C, should we use YouTube, it shouldn't be binary. I think it can be both. And it depends on where the sports property is on their growth phase. As you mentioned, Women's Super League in their growth phase, but that's not going to work for everyone. But I think that's where the toolbox analogy, to borrow that again, is, well, if it's not YouTube and the tools that we offer, then what else on the platform can we tap into? And that's where I think for the more seasoned rights holders, like the Bundesliga and like the Serie A, for example, where they've now tapped into the creator network and they're reaping the rewards of that.
And just on the back of the success that the WSL has seen with broadcasting live games on YouTube, are you sort of seeing more rights holders now kind of look at that as an option for them?
I think what that particular case study has proven is that accessibility drives growth. I think that's the premise. I think Women's Super League, that particular phase of growth, I think one of the best case studies for a more seasoned rights holder is Formula One, where they've recently partnered with Amelia de Moldenberg, for example, provided a fantastic shoulder piece of content which allows her access to the drivers, and they do a lap of a circuit, and ultimately it's a chat show just with Formula One drivers without their helmets off, and allowing the drivers to unlock their personality. So without wanting to deviate away from the question, I think what rights holders see in YouTube are many different things, but it depends on what their objectives are. And I think for the very best ones, that's where we work with the broadcaster and with the rights holder to really scale it up and drive everyone forward.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I suppose on the other side of that coin of, those people who are arguing that, YouTube should be the primary distribution platform, I suppose there are still some people who might be a little bit more wary just because of the monetization piece, right? That's maybe one of the sort of, whether they're right or wrong, the perceived limitations maybe of the platform from that perspective. But you mentioned the WSL already in terms of how they were able to monetize their presence with commercial partnerships through building that international audience. So there's obviously that kind of advertising piece. What are kind of some of the other ways that you're seeing rights holders monetize their presence on?
Yeah, so I think for football clubs specifically, channel memberships, and we should view that as it's a lift and shift of their existing membership schemes on their own web and app. For example, for Liverpool, it's another version of LFC TV, for example, which a lot of people in the UK know. For Barcelona, for example, they have Barca One, their own OTT platform, and on YouTube, on their YouTube channel membership, it's a lift and shift of that. For football clubs in Turkey, where football fandom is the religion, Galatasaray and Fenerbahce have seen huge success on this. And so I think channel memberships for football clubs is specifically one. For creators, they also tap into that. And it can be as easy as turning memberships on and giving access for £2 a month to custom emojis and badges, for example, which may seem gimmicky to the sports industry. But trust me, there are a lot of young people that are willing to pay for that.
Fenerbahce fans.
There's a lot of Fenerbahce fans willing to pay for custom emojis. So it comes back to this thing. I think YouTube is this toolbox. Where are you in the ecosystem, and how can we provide a solution? For clubs, that's memberships. For mediacos and broadcasters, that's providing access to sell advertising inventory. How can they do a commercial deal across all the different products? So linear, web and app, and YouTube. The best in class are doing that, and they're packaging it like that as well. And advertisers understand and realize that there is a young audience watching for longer on the TV via YouTube, and they want to tap into that as well.
Yeah, sure. I think it's interesting as well, because I suppose historically people have probably viewed the revenue that you can drive through a platform like YouTube as kind of not a huge revenue driver, but I suppose it sounds like now there are some that are actually driving genuinely meaningful revenue growth through the platform. Yeah.
The outlook of YouTube and advertising is now a premium destination where advertisers and brands want to be associated with everything to do with that sport. So they want to have the official rights holder channel. They would also want to, in the Bundesliga example, for example, want to partner with the creator, and then they also want to partner with the team channels, and they want to partner with the athlete channels, for example. And I think you can own all of that on YouTube, which is harder to do on more traditional platforms and outlets.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, sort of in terms of whether someone were to use YouTube over their own platform, is kind of that data piece that we were alluding to earlier. And you gave an example of some of the insights that YouTube can provide in terms of other things that their audience is engaging with. Is there anything else you can kind of share in terms of the insights that you are able to provide, and that maybe people would be able to action if they were on the platform?
Yeah, you can really get lost in YouTube analytics. You could boil the kettle and make a cup of tea, because you could be on there for an hour. I love it when I have the time to do it and dive into different things. I think, but we have our Studio AI tool, which if you don't have an hour or don't want to boil the kettle, on the YouTube dashboard will provide you with those quick 3 to 5 bullet points of here's what you need to know on your channel today. Is your click-through rate lower? Why? A lot of your audience have come from this channel. Why is that the case? And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of myth busting with YouTube. The data piece is one that I always raise an eyebrow at when there's a tight cliche of YouTube doesn't provide you with data and audience. I think what people are saying in that instance is they don't provide you with a name and an email address, which is traditionally what D2C data is provided. But outside of that, in my opinion, and having seen a lot of other tools, it is an unrivaled analytics system. And I think for the very best, they have audience development and insights teams that are in YouTube that are taking the APIs and connect it to their internal dashboards and having this macro picture of who their audience is, not just on YouTube, but on their web and app and on linear. And I gave the example on stage, rights holders like Formula One, like the NFL and the Premier League, they started to notice the trend of longer form content on TV and the increase in revenue from that, and are now leaning in with super compilations with extended highlights, for example. So it's being able to look at the data and then influence content strategy thereafter.
Yeah, sure. And you mentioned a couple of things over the course of this interview as well in terms of the trend of creators picking up live rights now. You've also spoken about channel memberships as another one. Also, we've seen primetime channels launched in the UK over the last couple of years. In terms of those sort of three things, we're expecting all three of those, given they're kind of like, I guess, relatively newer phenomenons, you're expecting them to kind of like continue to accelerate and be growth areas for the company?
Yeah, I think so. I think 2026, I think the use of AI in content creation, it's designed to empower human creativity. And how can you get edits out faster? How can you reach fans quicker? I think AI and content creation is going to be key for next year. I think we'll see a domino effect now of rights holders realizing that creators provide an opportunity to tap into younger audience and commercialize their fans. And I think another element of next year that I think we'll see, and we've seen, Cristiano Ronaldo's channel launch, which broke every record going. But I think we've seen more and more examples of athletes leaning into the platform. And I think the opportunity for athletes is obvious, extending sponsorships, gaining deep connections with fans. But I think for sports governing bodies is realizing that athletes are another marketing lever that they can use to attract fans. And I think the opportunity for rights holders is to support your athletes because they are a gateway to new younger audiences.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see that dynamic as well, I guess, between the athletes and the rights holders evolve. If they're growing that audience, what's their they're having it. So yeah,
they're not a threat.
Yeah.
They're a powerful marketing lever who have a different tone of voice and can provide many different things.
Yeah, and I guess that's the same applies to the creators as well, who are increasingly getting those live rights. Well, Jonny, very last thing before I let you go. If you were to for people watching, if you were to give them sort of like one golden piece of advice for their YouTube content, what would it be? I'll put you on the spot a little bit there.
Golden piece of advice that is
for all of these sports organisations who are desperate to know, what's going to make them succeed in YouTube.
Build a content strategy that's grounded in data first, and then everything else will follow.
There you go, Jonny. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
So there you have it. Plenty of insight in there, I'm sure, that you can all start incorporating into your YouTube strategies. But that's all we have time for this week. So thanks again to Jonny Keogh for joining us, and thank you for listening. Don't forget to leave a comment or email editor@sportspromedia.com with questions for future episodes. And remember, you can also tune into SportsPro's other podcasts, including StreamTime Sports, Mike's Out, and New Era. That's all from me. This episode was recorded at the SportsPro Media Summit in Madrid.